0%. That is the statistical likelihood that a wild apex predator, driven by millions of years of metabolic necessity, should choose to ignore a calorie-dense meal standing directly in front of it. You are currently that meal. Imagine the weight of 400 pounds of wet, matted fur pinning you into the freezing mud of a subarctic forest. You can smell the metallic tang of the predator's breath, a scent that triggers a primal, screaming alarm in your nervous system. Your ribs are beginning to flex under a pressure they weren't designed to withstand, and you are waiting for the inevitable snap. But the snap never comes. Instead, the pressure shifts. The predator isn't tightening its grip, it's adjusting its stance to gain leverage. With a heave that feels like an earthquake, it rolls a fallen cedar trunk off your legs, stands over you for a heartbeat of pure, terrifying silence, and then simply vanishes into the tree line. This scenario sounds like a piece of sentimental fiction, the kind of story we tell ourselves to feel better about our place in the world. But the gap between what we expect nature to do and what it actually does is widening every year. We have spent centuries convinced that the natural world is a cold, calculated machine. But the data is starting to suggest that the machine has a ghost in it. The machine is starting to break. For the better part of the last 300 years, the scientific establishment operated under a philosophy known as Cartesian dualism. René Descartes, the famous French philosopher, essentially argued that animals were bêtes machines, beast machines. In this view, a dog yelping when hit isn't feeling pain in the way you do. It is simply a clockwork mechanism emitting a sound because a gear was struck. This wasn't just a philosophical quirk. It became the bedrock of biology. It led to the adoption of Morgan's canon in the late 19th century, a rule that forbade scientists from attributing complex mental processes to animals if a simpler, more mechanical explanation existed. If an animal looks like it's being kind, the rule says, it's actually just a reflex. If it looks like it's mourning, it's actually just a hormonal fluctuation triggered by a change in social density. We were taught to look at the animal kingdom as a series of sophisticated biological programs running on autopilot. To suggest that a wild animal might have intent or empathy was considered the ultimate scientific sin, anthropomorphism. It was the mark of an amateur, a person who let their emotions cloud their observation of the raw, red reality of nature. But this rigid framework began to crumble when we started looking at the ocean. The water is deeper than we thought. Consider the case of the cleaner wrasse, a tiny fish no longer than your finger that operates a literal business on the coral reef. These fish set up cleaning stations where much larger predatory fish, sharks, groupers, and eels, liners up to have parasites removed from their scales and mouths. In a purely mechanical world, the big fish would simply eat the cleaner once the job is done. A free meal is a free meal. But as researcher Redwan Bashari discovered through thousands of hours of observation, the relationship is governed by a sophisticated system of social credit. The cleaners don't just eat parasites. They occasionally cheat by biting off a piece of the host fish's protective mucus. When they do this, the host fish reacts, and other client fish watching from the sidelines take note. Bashari found that cleaner wrasse actually perform better, meaning they cheat less, when they know they are being watched by potential clients. They are managing their reputation. This is a creature with a brain smaller than a grain of rice, yet it is performing a social calculation that involves tactical deception, reputation management, and the understanding of a witness. If a tiny fish can understand the social value of being helpful to a predator, what does that say about the cognitive ceiling of a dolphin or a whale? It suggests that help isn't a human invention. It's a biological currency that has been traded in the wild for eons. The math is changing. If we accept that animals can trade favors, we have to ask if they can recognize those favors when they come from us. This brings us to the concept of reciprocal altruism, a theory popularized by evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers in 1971. Trivers argued that for altruism to evolve, an organism must be able to recognize individuals, remember their past behavior, and adjust its own behavior accordingly. While this was originally meant to explain how members of the same species interact, we are seeing it jump the species barrier in spectacular ways. In 2017, off the coast of Rarotonga, marine biologist Nan Hauser was approached by a 50,000-pound humpback whale. The whale didn't just swim by, it began to tuck her under its pectoral fin and push her through the water with its head. For 10 minutes, Hauser was at the mercy of a creature that could have crushed her without even noticing. She was terrified, convinced this was the end. It was only when she surfaced that she saw why. A 15-foot tiger shark was lurking just a few yards away. The whale wasn't attacking her, it was shielding her. Once the shark left, the whale returned to its pod. This wasn't a trained animal, and Hauser wasn't feeding it. The whale had identified a vulnerable creature and a nearby predator, and it made a choice. It wasn't a choice driven by its own survival. In fact, it used its own body as a shield, incurring a minor risk. This is what biologists call interspecific altruism, and it suggests that some animals possess a theory of mind. They can look at another creature and understand that it is in a state of need or danger. The mirror is looking back. Theory of mind is the ability to attribute mental states, beliefs, intents, desires, emotions to oneself and to others. For a long time, we thought this was the exclusive domain of humans and perhaps a few great apes. But studies conducted at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology have pushed this boundary significantly. Researchers like Felix Warneken have shown that young chimpanzees will spontaneously help a human they don't know reach for an object that is out of their grasp, even when there is no reward involved. They recognize the goal of the human and provide the necessary labor to achieve it. This is profound because it means the animal isn't just reacting to a stimulus, it is modeling the human's mind in its own head. It is saying, that creature wants that object but cannot reach it. I can reach it, so I will help. When you apply this to wild rescue scenarios, the behavior of animals like the San Francisco humpback whale in 2011 takes on a different light. That whale, entangled in hundreds of pounds of nylon netting, didn't just sit still while divers cut the lines. It moved its body to expose the next tangle. It cooperated. When the final line was cut, the whale performed a series of breaches and tail slaps that some biologists interpreted as a display of joy or relief. But more tellingly, it approached each diver individually, making prolonged eye contact. In the world of marine biology, eye contact with a cetacean is a heavy thing. Their eyes are not just sensory organs. They are the windows of a brain that has been evolving its social complexity for 30 million years longer than ours. The eyes are the key. This leads us to the most intelligent and perhaps the most judgmental neighbors we have, the corvids. Crows, ravens, and magpies are effectively apes with wings. Their brain-to-body mass ratio is comparable to that of a chimpanzee, and their neurons are packed with a density that allows for incredible processing power. A landmark study at the University of Washington used 3D-printed masks to test whether wild crows could remember individual humans. The researchers wore a threatening mask while trapping and banding the crows, and a neutral mask when just walking around. Years later, the crows still mobbed the threatening mask, even when it was worn by different people who had never interacted with the birds. But the truly chilling part was that crows who were never even born at the time of the original trapping joined in the mobbing. The original crows had described the face to their offspring and peers. They had created a cultural memory of a specific human enemy. But reciprocity goes both ways. If they can build a profile of an enemy, they can build a profile of an ally. There are countless documented cases of gifting behavior, where crows bring shiny objects, keys, earrings, bits of polished glass, to humans who consistently help or feed them. This isn't just a bird finding trash. It is a bird selecting a specific object and placing it in a specific location to maintain a social bond. They are not just understanding the help, they are categorizing the helper. They are filing you away in a mental folder marked friend or hazard. The math is getting personal. But what if the help we provide isn't recognized as help at all? We have to address the reality of tonic immobility. In many viral videos where a human rescues a deer or a shark, the animal appears perfectly calm, almost zen-like. Skeptics often point out that this isn't trust, it's a neurological shutdown. When a prey animal's stress levels hit a certain threshold, the brain essentially flips a kill switch to prevent the animal from feeling the pain of being eaten alive. It becomes a living statue. To an untrained observer, a deer lying still while a human untangles its antlers from a fence looks like a touching moment of connection. In reality, the deer might be in a state of absolute paralyzed terror, its heart rate redlining while its body remains limp. This is where we have to be careful. If we project our own desire for gratitude onto a creature that is actually experiencing a physiological crisis, we are failing to respect the animal's reality. However, wildlife rehabilitators who work with these animals daily note a distinct shift that happens once the acute danger has passed. There is a moment after the netting is cut or the trap is sprung where the animal's physiology changes. The breathing slows, the muscle tension dissipates, and the animal makes a choice. It doesn't always run. Sometimes it stays. The silence is telling. In the world of neurobiology, there is a chemical that bridges the gap between species: oxytocin. Often called the bonding hormone, it is what allows a mother to bond with her infant, but it also spikes during positive social interactions. Interestingly, research has shown that when humans and dogs interact, oxytocin levels rise in both species. We have essentially hacked each other's endocrine systems over the last 30,000 years. But recent studies on wild animals, including hand-reared lions and wolves, show that similar chemical cascades can occur during interactions with trusted humans. This suggests that the biological hardware for bonding isn't something we created through domestication. It was already there, a latent potential in the mammalian and avian brain. When an animal understands help, it may not be understanding the concept of a rescue in a linguistic sense. It is experiencing a shift from a state of high cortisol threat to a state of oxytocin-mediated safety. It recognizes that the thing in front of it, the human, is the source of that safety. That is a form of understanding that is deeper than words. It is a fundamental realignment of the animal's worldview. For that moment, the human is no longer a predator. They are a biological anomaly, a source of grace in a world that usually offers only teeth. But nature isn't a church. There is a dark side to this understanding that many wholesome internet threads tend to ignore. When a wild animal learns that humans are helpful, it loses the one thing that keeps it alive: its fear. This is known as habituation, and in the wild, it is often a death sentence. A bear that learns that humans provide food or help is a bear that will eventually walk into a campsite and get shot by a panicked tourist or a park ranger. A dolphin that seeks out human interaction is a dolphin that is likely to be struck by a boat propeller or fed something toxic. This creates a heartbreaking paradox for the people who actually do the work of helping. To truly save a wild animal, you often have to make sure it hates you. Rehabilitators will use aversive conditioning, making loud noises or wearing frightening costumes, to ensure the animal associates humans with discomfort. They are providing the ultimate help, life, by pretending to be a threat. This suggests that the understanding we seek from animals is a selfish desire. We want the whale to look us in the eye and say thank you because it validates our ego. But the whale's survival depends on it seeing us as just another dangerous variable in a dangerous ocean. The most profound form of help is the kind that leaves no trace, the kind where the animal swims away thinking it escaped on its own. The cost is higher than we thought. So, do they understand? The answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's a sometimes, and more than you think. We are finding that the intelligence of the wild isn't a lower version of human intelligence. It's a different shape of it. It is an intelligence built on the hyper-accurate reading of intentions. An animal may not know what a fishing line is, but it knows what restriction feels like. It may not know what a diver is, but it knows the difference between a body that is tensed for a strike and a body that is relaxed for a task. They are reading the subtext of our movements, our heart rates, and even our chemical signatures. They are expert profilers of the human soul, because for them, knowing our intent is the difference between living another day and becoming a statistic. When we help them, we are stepping out of our roles as the planet's primary predator and into a role that has no name in the wild. We are becoming a glitch in the predatory cycle, and the animals, in their own silent, sophisticated way, are taking notes. They are recording the moments where the beast machine of humanity does something that doesn't fit the programming. They are watching us, waiting to see which version of the human shows up today. The wait is returning. This brings us back to the statistic we started with, 0%. In a world governed by raw entropy and the struggle for resources, there is no reason for an interspecies rescue to happen. There is no profit in a whale saving a diver or a crow bringing a gift to a stranger. These events are biological miracles, evidence that the red in tooth and claw version of nature we've been sold is only half the story. The other half is a hidden network of reciprocity and recognition that spans from the smallest reef fish to the largest mammals on Earth. We are part of that network, whether we realize it or not. Every time you choose to help, you are contributing to a data set that is being compiled by millions of eyes in the brush, in the sky, and under the waves. You are being judged by a jury of creatures who have been watching us since we first learned to sharpen stones. They don't need to speak our language to understand our heart. They just need to feel the difference between the hand that grips and the hand that gives. And in those moments of connection, the barrier between human and animal doesn't just thin, it evaporates. We are just two nervous systems, momentarily aligned, trying to make sense of a world that is often too big and too cruel to handle alone. But don't mistake that connection for a permanent peace. The wild is still the wild, and the rules of the game are still written in blood. The fact that an animal can understand help doesn't mean it will always want it, or that it will ever forgive us for the myriad ways we've broken its world. We are living in a time of ecological debt, and no amount of shiny objects brought by crows or eye contact with whales can balance the scales. The help we give is a drop of water in an ocean of damage. But maybe that drop is what matters. Maybe the fact that we can choose to be the anomaly is what defines us. We are the only species that can consciously decide to be the source of grace for another. That is a terrifying amount of power to hold, and most of the time we use it poorly. But every so often, the programming fails, the machine stops, and we do something that makes a 50-ton Leviathan stop and look us in the eye. In those moments, the answer to the question of whether they understand us becomes blindingly clear. They understand us perfectly. They might understand us better than we understand ourselves. Because while we are busy debating their intelligence in air-conditioned labs, they are out there in the cold, surviving the world we've built, and remembering every single face that helped them do it. And that brings us to the most chilling realization of all. If they can remember the face of the helper, they can also remember the face of the one who walked away. They are not just passive observers of their own lives. They are witnesses to ours. Every interaction is a deposition. Every encounter is a piece of evidence. We are being documented by a global intelligence that doesn't use paper or hard drives, but carries its records in the folds of its brain and the sequences of its DNA. We have spent so much time wondering if animals are smart enough to recognize our humanity. But we should have been wondering if we are brave enough to live up to the version of us they see. Because when the world finally strips us down to our most basic elements, when we are no longer protected by our technology or our titles, we are just another creature in the mud. And in that moment, the only thing that will matter is the reputation we've built with the rest of the living world. The crows will talk about us. The whales will remember us. The predators will decide our fate based on the chemical residue of our past choices. We are never truly alone in the woods, and we are never truly unobserved. The beast machine is watching, and it has a very long memory. Recall for a moment that 400 pounds of matted fur pinning you into the freezing mud. Feel that immense, suffocating weight pressing the oxygen out of your lungs and the desperate, frantic beating of your heart against your ribs. You were certain that the weight meant your end, a cold, mechanical conclusion to a fragile life. But remember the moment that weight shifted, not to crush, but to lift. That predator didn't see a meal. It saw a problem it could solve. It looked at the architecture of your suffering and decided to intervene. That is the definitive closing argument of the natural world. It proves that the logic of nature isn't just about who eats whom. It's about the terrifying, beautiful capacity for a mind to recognize itself in another. As you stand there in the mud, watching that fur disappear into the darkness, you realize the chilling truth. The predator knew exactly what you were, and it saved you anyway. It didn't do it for a reward, and it didn't do it because it was confused. It did it because, in the raw silence of the forest, the only thing more powerful than the instinct to kill is the recognition of a life worth saving. You are alive because a monster chose to be a miracle. Make sure you're worth the effort. If this deep dive into the minds of the wild changed how you look at the creatures in your own backyard, I'd love to hear about it. Have you ever had a moment where an animal seemed to see right through you? Tell me that story in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if you want to keep exploring the edges of what we know about the world we share, hit that subscribe button and join us for the next one. There's a lot more waiting in the dark.